I get asked a lot on my Instagram in my DMs, how do I make my reaction videos over on my main channel? So today I thought we could go over in detail what I do, how I set everything up, how I film, how I edit, and how I make my reaction videos on Natalie Gold. Follow me on Instagram, by the way, if you're interested. You can follow me at Natty Gold. I will always link that in the description bar down below. One thing I noticed when I got started making reaction videos on YouTube is there are some resources on how to film and edit and make a reaction video. There are definitely lots of tutorials and videos out there explaining how to sit down and make them, but there aren't a lot of explanations when it comes to things like copyright and fair use and little things that different people use to kind of make sure they're staying within fair use, little tips and tricks that are really hard to kind of figure out on your own. I get asked questions all the time about how do I avoid copyright strikes and claims, and knock on wood, I've been fairly lucky so far. Obviously that could change at any point in time, but there are certain things that I do. There are certain tips and tricks that I've learned over the course of making these videos that work for me. Some of these tips that I'm gonna share with you guys today have actually been shared with me by people like Brandon Likes Movies. If for some reason you haven't heard of his reaction channel, you should absolutely go check him out. He is incredible. He makes really well-made, well-done reaction videos to all sorts of movies and shows, and he's just a really sweet guy. So yeah, please go check out his channel if you have not heard of him. I've written everything down that I could possibly think of to share with you guys, and it's long, so I'm gonna try to power through this as much as possible and just give you the important info that I wish I knew when I was starting out. Some of this stuff I already did know because I've worked in the entertainment business and I've made videos and I've worked on short films and things before. So some of this stuff is coming from that background and some of it is just coming from experience and personal preference. So nothing in here is a really hard and fast rule. It's more of a suggestion in the way that I do things, but because people have been asking me that question a lot on Instagram of how I make my videos, what do I do when I'm editing them, things like that, I figured it'd be good to share it with you guys. So yeah, let's get into the video. The first thing that I would say to pay attention to when you're filming a video is your audio. That's because most people will tolerate watching a video that maybe has a slightly mediocre looking image, maybe an image that's not super well lit. It doesn't look great, but if the audio is really clear and crisp, they can hear what you're saying. They're gonna get the gist of what your commentary is, what you're doing, what you're saying, and they're gonna be able to stay engaged with the video a lot longer than if the reverse was true, than if the audio was really bad and if the image was really clear. If you've been watching my reaction videos for a long time, you might know that audio is something I actually struggle with because I tend to scream a lot. I tend to make the audio, the mic, blow out a little bit and peak a lot. So this is actually something I've struggled with quite a bit, although it has gotten better over time. I'm still working on really trying to perfect my audio setup. If you don't scream a lot like me, you might have a lot less issues than I do, but I have learned a lot over the course of making these videos, so here's what I've learned. If you're just getting started and you're new to making reaction videos, I wouldn't necessarily say that you have to get a microphone. If you've got an iPhone or a really good smartphone that you're filming on, you can use the built-in microphone to start that way. That's actually what I would advise. That's how I started when I was reacting to Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. I didn't really have a separate microphone. I was just recording with my iPhone. It worked really well for a while because I was making sure that I was always sealed off in a room that was quieter than the rest of the house. Sometimes I would shut off the AC if I could bear to be in the heat because that would really cut down on ambient noise coming in and affecting the audio of my video. But there were definitely times where people couldn't really hear what I was whispering. They couldn't really hear what I was saying. It worked really well for the times when I would scream, which is a lot, but it wouldn't really work well for the times that I had to whisper or was saying things quietly. So eventually I decided to upgrade. Once I started making money on YouTube, that's when I decided to invest back into what I was doing and really look into buying a microphone. However, one mistake that I made was starting off cheap. So my advice to you is to not be cheap like I was. You don't have to break the bank or anything when buying a microphone, but I would definitely advise waiting until you can afford to buy a decent quality mic, something like the Blue Yeti or even the Blue Yeti Nano, which is what I have right here. I'm considering upgrading because now I'm at the point where I really want to get a great microphone and learn how to make sure that I can scream and stuff and not peek out the microphone. I have to do more research still, but this is what I have right here is the Blue Yeti Nano. It was only $100. I think it's a great starter mic when you're finally able to invest back into making videos. I wouldn't suggest shelling out that kind of money until you know that this is something you really like, or until you're making money from it, or just when it's worth it to you. I wouldn't say you have to start with a microphone like this, but I would advise just not even bothering with the super cheap options. If you guys remember, you can go back to my alien reaction video. I'm using a super cheap $20 lavalier microphone in that video, and the audio is rough. There's a lot of peaking, a lot of blowing out the mic completely when I'm screaming. It just didn't work that well, and quite frankly, I think the audio on my iPhone microphone was better than that microphone. So ultimately, after buying that, it really just wasted my own time and it wasted my own money. Granted, it was only $20, but still, it was just a waste. So I would completely avoid going the cheap route at all. I would say just start off with what you have and what makes sense, and then wait until you can actually afford something that is going to upgrade your gear, because if you do that middle step of being cheap, it might just actually waste time and money. Another thing to keep in mind when you are recording your reaction videos for audio is if you're using a program like OBS Streamlabs, make sure that you are not recording the desktop audio for the movie that you're watching while you're also recording your reaction. You want to make sure that you record your reaction separately, mute the desktop audio, and then record the movie later after you've already watched it. That way you can edit those things together in post, and you can really edit the audio for the movie exactly how you want it. You can edit your own audio exactly how you want it. If you record the two sounds together at the same time, the movie and your commentary, you're not going to be able to edit them and tweak them the way that you want. They're going to be fused together as one audio track. So I've made that mistake before in the past. It's why I've had to refilm videos. It's not the end of the world when it happens, but if you're into doing the first time watching reaction, it will ruin your first time reaction if you do that. And lastly, another thing to keep in mind with the audio is if you're recording it separately from your video. So if you're using an external mic and you're recording that onto your computer, but maybe you're recording on a camera that's not feeding into your computer, just make sure to clap at the beginning once you're filming and once you're recording. That way in editing, it's really easy to sync the two up, sync the video and the audio up. You just sync it on the clap. That's kind of why they have a movie slate in movies. If you didn't know, that's the sound of the movie slate, is so that they can sync up the audio with the visual. The next step is lighting. Lighting is so important. I would say lighting comes right after audio. It's a common thing in the film industry. You always prioritize your audio, then lighting, and then your camera. So lighting is very important. This is because a great camera will not help you at all if you are lighting yourself really poorly. Likewise, a webcam or an iPhone camera can look really professional and really good if you're lighting yourself the right way. It's really all about light when it comes to photography and cinematography. Lighting will really help determine how your image comes across. I'm mostly just going to talk about how I light myself and the basic reasons behind that. I talked to my fiance a lot about this because, quite frankly, my fiance is a massive lighting geek. He helped me light my videos. The lights I'm using are his that we use for his short films. So some of the equipment that I have isn't necessarily something that you might need to go out and get. It might be kind of pricey. That's because we also make films. That's because we work in entertainment. So it's not just for my YouTube videos. There are definitely affordable options that you can find. There are definitely really cheap solutions, and I'll get into one cheap solution that you can start off with if you just want to see if you like making reaction videos. To light your face in a flattering way, you want to use what's called soft light. The way to create soft light is to create a large source of even light. The best way that I can explain this to you is to show you how I do this myself. On both sides of my setup, I have a light stand, and they're pointing at my window, which currently has the blind pulled down. And the blind is this canvas colored blind, which is important because you want to use something that's light or at least white or maybe even tan colored is fine. And the lights are bouncing off of the blinds and back at me. So it's creating this really large source for the light to bounce off of so that it's not direct. It's not harsh, it's just bouncing back at me. It's really soft, it's large, so it fills in all of my face, which basically just means that it's filling in any like weird imperfections. It's making me look better than I probably do in real life. I mean, I don't know, I feel like I look kind of the same, but it just makes you look a little bit better. Whereas if you just have a harsh light pointed at you, you can sometimes see a little bit more of your imperfections. If you don't really care about that, it's not that big of a deal. You could even point a light at a wall to bounce back at you as long as the wall is like white or a very light colored wall. You don't want to do anything like, I wouldn't do it with the wall in this room because this wall is green, so I would look kind of weird. But because I have this window in front of me with this blind, it works really well. Another thing you could do if you're just getting started is just sit in front of a window to film. Make sure that it's a large window, again, because a large amount of light, of even light, is what's really gonna help things look soft and just look a little bit nicer. You also wanna make sure that the light is indirect, meaning that the sun isn't just coming through the window, like the sun isn't setting as you're filming a video and it's coming through the window. My window works really well because the sun is never really coming directly through this window. It's always kind of on the other side of the house. So it's always indirect light, and it's a very large window. So that's what I would suggest if you're just getting started and you don't want to buy a light. You can always film in front of a window if you have one. Or you can always invest in other kinds of lighting. There are things like ring lights, but you just want to make sure that the light is big enough that it is going to fill in your whole face in the way that you want it, because if a light is really small, it might not do that. Also, to be fair, I think when I filmed my first ever reaction video, my Star Wars episode 4, I think I filmed that mostly with overhead lighting and sitting in front of a window. If you go back and you look at that video, it's really yellow. It doesn't look that good. Granted, some of that has to do with me using the front-facing camera on the iPhone, but it was passable. It wasn't that bad, and I think if you're just getting started, don't stress about this stuff too much. As long as it's passable and you're having fun with it, people will watch it. I'll also go into detail about the other kinds of lighting things that you can use. Behind me, you'll see that there is a little background light. It's called a practical light. That is completely optional, but I think it really does help make everything just look a little bit better, a little more fun, a little more colorful. It can also help add depth to the image and to the video. The way my lighting geek fiance Tyler explained it to me is that by having a practical light as far back as possible, preferably pushed up against a wall, will create just a more interesting image. You can see the light hitting the wall, but it's not, you know, in the middle of the ground. It's all the way in the far background. That way there's some depth being created. There's light up here, it's dark right behind me, and then there's a little bit of light in the background. It could be done a little bit better than the way I'm doing it. This is a lamp that I already owned, and then I just got this cheap LED color changing light bulb on Amazon, so I can change the color if I want. And yeah, I'll link everything that I'm using in the description bar below for those that are curious, but that's definitely not something that's necessary. It's just for fun, and it just adds more depth and more interesting things to the image. You'll also notice a lot of streamers do this with RGB lighting or with nano leaves. Nano leaves are kind of ridiculous and expensive in my opinion, and I kind of hate the way that they look personally, but some people really like them, and that's also a way that you can add depth and light to your image in an interesting way that makes it more multi-dimensional. Lastly, for lighting, there's also something called a hair light. I don't really want to go into depth with this, but it is something that I used to do for some of my videos. If you go back, I think for like V for Vendetta or Thor, I might have been using a hair light, but what happened with that is the hair light I was using was so powerful that it was also filling the middle of the room and kind of ruining this depth thing that we have going on. So I actually don't use a hair light anymore. And also it doesn't really work for me because I move so much, and a hair light really has to stay in a specific spot. And if you move your chair, if you move around a lot, it kind of, if it's not in the right exact spot, it's not flattering. So that was something I kind of learned, that I just don't feel like I need it for my videos, but some people definitely use them and it can really look nice. For better and more detailed lighting tips, I would suggest going and looking at a channel like The Slanted Lens. This is a channel that Tyler recommended to you guys. He knows a lot more about lighting. He can go into a lot more detail. So if that is something that interests you and you're just curious about learning about lighting, especially for cinematic reasons, I would definitely go check out his channel. Now, let's talk about cameras, the third thing that you need to film a reaction video. Now, if you're just getting started making videos, I really wouldn't worry too much about the camera. Nowadays, iPhones and smartphones, a lot of them have really good cameras, especially the new ones. Their cameras are better than some other like professional cameras that I've owned. So I wouldn't really worry too much about investing in anything crazy. If you have an iPhone or a good smartphone with a good quality camera, I would just get a smartphone tripod off of Amazon and place it in front of you. Make sure that it's relatively like eye level with you, so that's a good flattering angle. I would just film with that. When I got started on my main channel, I used my iPhone for a really long time. It worked really well for a while, and the only reason I changed is because I wanted to start recording through OBS. And at that point, I switched to a webcam because, I don't know, I guess I had this weird idea in my head, like I had to switch to a webcam. At that point in time, I really could have switched to a camera, but I wasn't really thinking smartly. Again, sometimes when you're just getting started, you make a lot of dumb purchases and you waste a little time and money. So this was another example of me purchasing something I didn't really need. I switched to a Logitech C920. For webcams, I would really only suggest the C920 or the Logitech Brio. Those are the best ones from my experience doing research and in use. The C920 worked well for me. I did have some issues with desaturation and the image looking a little flat. You can really play around with the webcams though. I've seen people who have filmed really high quality looking video, just lighting really well and knowing exactly how to use their webcam and exactly what settings to use. For me, I think I should have just switched to the camera because this camera that I'm using currently, we already owned it. We just had to figure out how to use it as a webcam so that I could record with OBS Streamlabs. But if you want to upgrade and you don't want to use a smartphone, a webcam is a good in-between step to do. I would just suggest the C920 or the Brio. The pro with using a camera like a webcam is that you can record directly onto your computer and you have the files ready to go. If you're using something like a smartphone, you just have to transfer the files after the fact, which can sometimes be tedious, but if you have a Mac, it's not necessarily that hard if you're using an iPhone. For me, I have an iPhone and a PC, so it was a little bit more annoying, but that's definitely something you can do. It's not impossible, it just takes a little more time. Nowadays, I use a Canon EOS Rebel T3i. That is what I'm filming on right now. We happen to own this camera already. It was just laying around. We would use it for different short films. Since then, Tyler has upgraded his short film setup, so he doesn't really need this camera anymore, but I did. So now I use it. I get to reap the benefits, which is very, very nice. Thank you, Tyler. And we just set it up to use it as a webcam using Canon's program, their EOS webcam utility. It's just a program that we downloaded and it helps utilize this camera as a webcam, and I can use it as a device in my OBS Streamlabs software. You can also use Sony cameras with a capture card. I don't know too much about that method because I haven't done it myself, but Harris Heller here on YouTube, he is a massive YouTube channel, very successful, big streamer on Twitch as well. He's a big tech geek and he knows far more about that kind of stuff than I do. So if you're interested in that method, I would definitely check out his channel. I should probably mention, I'm gonna link all of the YouTube channels that I'm mentioning in the description bar below because sometimes when I'm just saying them, it's probably hard to understand what I'm saying. So if you're curious, go down on the description bar below. I'll list all the gear that I'm using as well as all the channels that I'm mentioning. Now it's time to film. Like I mentioned before, I use OBS Streamlabs. I just like the ease of using a software like that, mainly because I used to stream on Twitch a lot as well, and I needed to learn how to use that program anyway. But it's also nice to just know that I'm recording my files directly onto my computer. I don't have to worry about running out of space on my Canon. I can use the space on my computer, which is a lot larger than some of the SD cards. I just have the peace of mind as well of being able to see that I'm still recording while I'm watching a movie. I feel like if I was just recording with my camera, I would be really scared to just trust that the camera was still recording. That's just me personally. Some people record separately and then upload their files to their computer later. That also works perfectly well as well. You can do either option, whichever you prefer. Like I mentioned before, I always record my reaction separately from the movie. I filmed the movie after the fact. To sync them up in post or in editing, I just say playing in 3, 2, and then I head nod on the 1 when I'm clicking play for the movie. You can say playing in 3, 2, 1. You don't have to omit the 1, but I like to feel like a news anchor that's going live when I do that, so it makes me happy to do it that way. The next step is editing. This part can be the biggest headache and the most challenging, but I think it can also be the most rewarding part and the most fun. There are a ton of different editing softwares out there, so I would just say if you're getting started, use whatever is most accessible to you. Things like Adobe Premiere can be super overwhelming and tricky to learn, especially if you're brand new to editing. And on top of that, they can be really, really expensive. I only switched to Adobe Premiere once I started making money on YouTube. I did not do it before then. Before that, I had a little MacBook and I used iMovie, and it took forever to process my videos on that tiny laptop. It was kind of annoying. My laptop was kind of on its last leg, but it worked. And my videos did well, and that was doing iMovie for Star Wars, for Lord of the Rings, for Alien, for a lot of those movies I was editing on iMovie. So I would say just start with what you have. If you have a PC, there are free editing softwares out there. I'm not familiar with them all, but there are things like DaVinci Resolve. DaVinci Resolve also has a paid version, which is still substantially cheaper than Adobe. And there are other softwares out there as well. So I would just say do your research, figure out what makes the most sense for you to try out. But I would definitely advise starting with something that's free. See what your style is, see how you like to work, see how you like to edit, see if you even like making these videos before you spend a ton of money on an editing software that is a headache to learn. Here's where we get into the nitty-gritty details of how I edit my videos to stay within fair use law. When it comes to making reaction videos, there is one major concern that I think everybody needs to be mindful of, and that is fair use. Fair use is a doctrine in the United States copyright law that allows limited use of copyright material without requiring permission from the rights holders, such as for commentary, criticism, news reporting, research, teaching, or scholarship. It basically means that your work needs to be transformative and that you need to be mindful of the amount of the original source material that you are using. Keep in mind that everything that I'm going to mention here is just a suggestion. It's not a hard and fast rule. These are just tips that I've received from other people and things that I've learned along the way that work for me. Ultimately, it is up to the discretion of the copyright holder whether or not they decide to place a copyright claim or a strike on a video. And there are a lot of differences between a copyright claim and a copyright strike. I'm not going to go into those differences here. There are plenty of videos on YouTube if that is something that you want to learn more about. With that being said, let's get into the main things that I do to stay within copyright fair use. The first thing I do is I make sure to stay at or around 10 minutes of total footage used from the original piece that I'm commenting on. This means that at the end of my rough cut, when I'm done with the first draft of the edit for a YouTube video, I will add up the amount of footage that I'm using from the show or the movie and make sure it is either at or under 10 minutes. Sometimes if it goes a little bit over, that's fine, but I really try to stay at or around 10 minutes. I don't like to use more than that. The second thing I do is I heavily edit music scenes, either by changing the pitch and bringing the volume of the music scene down a lot if it's not that necessary to hear, or if I'm just commenting on the action of a scene and it's not necessary to hear the sound for the scene at all. I'll mute the clip entirely and just put my commentary over it. The music industry can be kind of savage when it comes to copyright claims, so I like to try to avoid some of that stuff by really just pulling back from the music stuff a lot. This is definitely trickier with movies like Star Wars and Lord of the Rings that have really beautiful, ever-present scores throughout the entire piece, but I just do the best that I can with that. Another thing I do is I always make sure to cut a clip from a movie or show after it's played for 10 seconds. I will either cut further into the scene, cut to a different scene, just cut to my reaction. This is something that I've also heard from different folks, that you want to cut away, because usually after you've played a clip for 10 seconds, if you play it for longer, those clips can tend to be the reason you get a copyright claim, just from my experience and others' experience. Lastly, and I think this is the most important thing you can do, I do my best to make sure that my videos are as transformative as possible. This means commenting a lot. Commenting on everything that I'm seeing that I feel called to comment on. This actually isn't that hard for me, because if you guys haven't figured it out, I really like to talk. I've kind of always been one of those people who has a really hard time not talking during movies. If I'm watching a movie with friends, I'm constantly reacting, but I really try my best not to ruin the movie by talking through it. But when I watch a movie with Tyler, it drives him nuts, because sometimes I'll just talk, because it's my fiance, so I feel like I can be myself with him, and he'll just pause the movie and be like, "Are you done? Can we continue with the movie?" So it's not that hard for me to really comment on stuff and react to things and give my thoughts and feedback on a lot of different things that I see happening, especially when it comes to the plot, the acting, things like that. I'm really called to comment on. The more you can elaborate on your reaction and on your commentary, the better. My goal when I'm making a video is to really make sure that the copyright holder knows I am not just posting their movie. I am posting a video that's about and inspired by their piece, but it is completely different. My priority is making sure that I stay under fair use. I've seen videos where people are just reacting to a movie and they're not talking that much, but their reactions are funny, and those are great videos, and I'm not trying to say otherwise. Those videos are very entertaining. This is how I do my videos, because I'm very concerned about, the risk of getting a claim or a strike particularly. So this is what I do, and this is what works for me. The last thing that I do that I think is important, when you're posting the video, you want to make sure that you're giving credit to the original source material. This is as simple as just putting it in the description bar of the video below. What I do is I say original series or original movie, whatever it may be, the title of what I'm watching, and then I'll put the fair use copyright statement again. I don't know if that's really necessary to put down there. I don't know if that's like a legal thing or if it's just polite, but either way, I think it's good to do that. It goes for when you're citing your sources too, right? Like if you were writing a research paper, you would cite your sources. So to me, it's the equivalent of doing that. You want to make sure that you're giving credit where credit is due, and you're not claiming to own any of the property that you're reacting to. And that's how I make my reaction videos, guys. I know it seems probably like a lot, but it's really not that hard. I mean, at this point, I've kind of got it down to a science, and yes, there are still things that I could improve upon for sure. I am not perfect by any means, but this is just what I do when I find works for me. I figured after all the questions that I was getting on Instagram, it would be good to do a sit-down video that was more detailed, explaining how I do it, so that those who are curious can maybe learn from my mistakes. Of course, everything in this video that I mentioned is merely a suggestion. It is not a hard and fast rule. I find that the most important thing when you're making videos is to make content that speaks to you, find your style, find your rhythm, and of course, have fun. That is the most important thing for me anyway. I find that when I'm not having fun anymore, it's not worth doing anymore. So the reason I do this is because I love it and I enjoy it. So I hope that this helps you guys in some way. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, because it really helps me out, lets me know that you guys want to see more stuff like this. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Of course, I would love to know, especially if you have any questions. I'd love to hear from you guys. And yeah, until the next one, stay golden. Bye.